Immigrant saves choking diner, shocked to learn it's the mayor who grants citizenship. The words played over and over in Mateo Alvarez's mind as he scrubbed the already clean countertop for the third time, his calloused hands moving in the same circular motion they had for the past 2 years. The same motion, the same diner, the same ache in his chest when he thought of home. Morning light filtered through the smudged windows of Rosie's diner, catching dust particles that danced in the air like memories. 6 a.m. Shifts were Mateo's favorite. Quiet, predictable, safe. Before the rush, before the noise, before the reminder that he was still an outsider in this vast American city that hadn't yet decided if it would embrace him or spit him out. "You're going to wear a hole through that counter, mijo," Rosie called from the kitchen, her voice warm like the fresh bread she baked every morning. She was the closest thing to family Mateo had found since crossing the border 3 years ago, leaving behind everything he knew in Guatemala. "Sorry," he mumbled, hanging the rag over the sink edge. "Just thinking." Rosie's eyes softened. At 62, she had a map of wrinkles that told stories of her own immigration journey decades before. The citizenship interview again? Mateo nodded, his throat tightening. 6 months of waiting for a response after his application. 6 months of jumping whenever his phone rang. 6 months of dreams where he finally belonged somewhere. "It will come," Rosie said, with the certainty of someone who believed good things happened to good people. Mateo wished he shared her faith. The morning unfolded like so many before it. Regulars trickling in, the rhythm of orders called out, coffee poured, plates served. Mateo moved through it all with practiced efficiency, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. By 11, the lunch crowd began filling the booths, bringing with them the cold air from outside and conversations about things Mateo still struggled to understand. Local politics, sports teams, cultural references that made others laugh while he nodded along. It was during this rush that the bell above the door chimed, and a man in an expensive-looking gray coat walked in. There was something vaguely familiar about him, perhaps from a newspaper or television, but Mateo couldn't place him. The man chose a booth by the window, away from the other diners, and opened a leather portfolio filled with papers. "Table 6, Rosie nudged Mateo. Important-looking guy. Mateo approached with a menu and his rehearsed greeting. "Welcome to Rosie's. Can I start you with something to drink?" The man looked up, startled, as if pulled from deep thought. His eyes were tired but kind. "Just coffee, Black. And whatever your lunch special is. Meatloaf with mashed potatoes today," Mateo replied, jotting down the order. "Perfect." The man returned to his papers. Mateo delivered the coffee moments later, then retreated to help other customers. From behind the counter, he observed the man occasionally. The way he frowned at his documents, the distracted sips of coffee, the tired rubbing of his temples. There was a weight to him that Mateo recognized, the invisible burden of responsibility. 15 minutes later, Mateo carried the steaming meatloaf plate to table 6. The man thanked him absently, then took a large bite while still reviewing a document. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The man's eyes suddenly widened. His hand flew to his throat. The fork clattered to the table. Mateo felt ice shoot through his veins. "Sir, are you okay?" But the man couldn't speak. His face was turning an alarming shade of red, then purple. He was choking. Without thinking, Mateo moved. 2 years as a paramedic in Guatemala before the gang violence drove him away. His body remembered even if his mind had tried to forget. He pulled the man from the booth, positioned himself behind him, wrapped his arms around the larger man's waist, and performed the Heimlich maneuver with precise, forceful thrusts. The diner had gone silent. Mateo was vaguely aware of Rosie calling someone, of other customers standing frozen, of his own heart hammering against his ribs. 1 thrust, 2, 3, 4. On the 5th, a piece of meatloaf shot from the man's mouth and skidded across the linoleum floor. The man gasped, a desperate, beautiful sound of air rushing back into lungs. His knees buckled, and Mateo guided him gently back to the booth, one hand steady on his shoulder. "Breathe slowly," Mateo instructed, his voice calm despite the adrenaline flooding his system. "Small breaths." The man nodded, tears streaming from the corners of his eyes. Not emotional tears, just the body's response to the trauma. His hand clutched Mateo's forearm with surprising strength. "Thank you." He finally managed, his voice raspy. "I think you just saved my life." Mateo shrugged, suddenly self-conscious as he realized the entire diner was watching. "I was a paramedic." Before what?" the man asked, his breathing steadying. "Before everything fell apart. Before I had to leave in the middle of the night. Before I became someone with no country." But Mateo just said, "Before I came here." Rosie appeared with a glass of water. Ambulance is on the way, she told the man, then squeezed Mateo's shoulder. Our Mateo is a hero. The man drank slowly, color returning to his face. I don't need an ambulance, he said, straightening his tie. Thanks to your quick-thinking waiter here. His eyes found Mateo's, really seeing him now. What's your name, son? Mateo. Mateo Alvarez. Something flickered across the man's face. Recognition, perhaps, or curiosity. Well, Mateo Alvarez, I owe you a debt of gratitude that a simple thank you doesn't cover. He extended his hand. I'm Robert Keller. Mateo took the offered hand, noting the firm handshake, the expensive watch peeking from beneath the man's shirt cuff. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but he couldn't place it. It was Rosie who gasped. Mayor Keller. I thought you looked familiar. Oh my goodness, Mateo, you just saved the mayor. The world seemed to tilt beneath Mateo's feet. Mayor Keller. The man whose signature would be on citizenship approval letters. The man who had championed stricter immigration policies according to the newspaper headlines. Mateo struggled to understand. That Mayor Keller. The mayor smiled, apparently used to being recognized. Guilty as charged, though today I'm just a man who foolishly tried to eat and read at the same time. His eyes found Mateo again, narrowed slightly. Alvarez, are you by chance waiting on a citizenship application, mister? Alvarez? The question hit like a physical blow. How did he know? Was this some kind of trap? Mateo's heart raced with sudden fear, the ingrained worry of someone who had learned that attention from authorities rarely ended well. He glanced toward the diner's back exit, a habit he couldn't break. It's okay, Mayor Keller said softly, noting Mateo's reaction. I remember most applications that cross my desk, especially ones with distinguished service records. Mateo swallowed hard, nodding once. 6 months ago. Still waiting. Before the mayor could respond, paramedics pushed through the diner door, breaking the moment. They insisted on checking the mayor's vitals despite his protests. Mateo stepped back, retreating to the counter where Rosie waited, her eyes wide. Did that just happen? She whispered. Mateo watched as Mayor Keller spoke with the paramedics, occasionally glancing in his direction. I think I just ruined everything, he murmured. He knows about my application. Or maybe you just made a powerful friend, Rosie countered, ever the optimist. The paramedics eventually left, satisfied that the mayor was indeed fine. The other diners returned to their meals, though the excited murmurs continued. Mayor Keller gathered his documents, paid his bill, and left a tip that made Rosie's eyebrows shoot up. Before leaving, he approached Mateo one last time. Mr. Alvarez, he said, voice low. Thank you again. I don't forget the people who helped me. He pressed a business card into Mateo's palm. My direct line. Call my office tomorrow. We should talk. And then he was gone, the bell chiming his departure, leaving Mateo staring at the small rectangle of cardstock as if it might bite him. See? Rosie nudged him. Powerful friend. Mateo tucked the card into his pocket, unsure if he felt hope or dread. In his experience, the attention of powerful men rarely ended well for people like him. That night, sleep eluded him. The small apartment felt more confining than usual. The sounds from neighboring units more intrusive. Mateo lay awake, thinking of home, of his mother's hands kneading dough, of his father's quiet strength, of the life he'd left behind when staying meant certain death. He thought of the citizenship application, the fragments of his life distilled into forms and documents that couldn't possibly convey what it meant to rebuild yourself in a strange land. And he thought of Mayor Keller, the surprised look in his eyes when he'd recognized Mateo's name. What did that mean? The mayor had mentioned his service record. Had someone investigated him? Was his application flagged for rejection? By morning, Mateo had convinced himself that calling the number would be a mistake. He would keep his head down, as he always had. Stay invisible. Safe. But Rosie had other plans. You're calling, she insisted when he arrived for his shift, shadows under his eyes. Right now, before we open. Rosie, no arguments. She guided him to the back office, picked up the phone, and handed it to him. This could change everything, mijo. Sometimes life throws you a rope when you're drowning. You have to grab it. His hand trembled as he dialed the number on the card. 1 ring, 2, 3. Mayor Keller's office. This is Andrea speaking. Mateo nearly hung up. My name is Mateo Alvarez. The mayor asked me to call. A pause. Ah, Mr. Alvarez. Yes, Mayor Keller left specific instructions. He'd like to meet with you today if possible. Would 2 p.m. work? The mayor wanted to meet him. Mateo glanced at Rosie, who was listening intently. She nodded encouragement. Yes, he managed. 2 o'clock is fine. After getting directions to the mayor's office, Mateo hung up, feeling lightheaded. See? Rosie beamed. Told you. Now go home and put on your good shirt. The blue one that makes your eyes pop. But my shift, I'll cover it. This is more important. Her expression softened. Mateo, you've worked every day for 2 years without complaint. You've sent money home every month. You've studied English at night and taken those citizenship classes. You deserve this chance, whatever it is. Hours later, Mateo sat in an austere waiting room at City Hall, tugging at the collar of his blue button-down shirt. The receptionist had offered him water twice, seeming surprised when he declined. His mouth was dry, but his hands were unsteady, and he feared spilling. Precisely at 2, the office door opened, and Mayor Keller emerged, looking more rested than the day before. Mr. Alvarez, he said warmly, extending his hand. Thank you for coming. Please join me inside. The office was surprisingly modest, spacious but not ostentatious. Family photos lined one shelf, and a large window overlooked the city park. Mayor Keller gestured to a sitting area with 2 comfortable chairs. How's your throat? Mateo asked, surprising himself with the question. The mayor smiled, touching his neck reflexively. Much better, thanks to you. He settled into one of the chairs. I've spent the morning learning more about you, Mr. Alvarez. With your permission, I'd like to discuss your situation. Mateo nodded cautiously, perching on the edge of the opposite chair. You were a paramedic in Guatemala for 6 years. Exemplary record. You treated victims of gang violence regardless of affiliation, which eventually put you on a gang's hit list. The mayor looked up from the file in his hands. You crossed the border after your clinic was burned down and your partner was killed. You applied for asylum, which was granted temporarily. You've worked at Rosie's Diner for 2 years, pay taxes, take English classes, volunteer at the community health clinic on weekends, and applied for citizenship 6 months ago. He closed the file. Does that sound accurate? Mateo felt exposed, vulnerable. Yes, your application has been under review because of some concerns about the circumstances of your border crossing. Here it was, the rejection, the possible deportation. Mateo's fingers dug into his palms. However, the mayor continued, I've taken the liberty of expediting the review process in light of yesterday's events. He leaned forward. Mr. Alvarez, do you know why I was at that diner yesterday? Mateo shook his head. I was reviewing the final details of our city's new immigration integration program, an initiative to help immigrants navigate the path to citizenship more effectively. A small smile played at his lips. Ironic, isn't it? There I was, planning ways to help people like you, completely unaware that one such person would save my life hours later. Mateo remained silent, afraid to hope. I believe in immigration done right, Mr. Alvarez. I believe this country needs people who contribute, who care for others, who embody the values we claim to hold dear. The mayor stood, walking to his desk. People like you. He returned with a large envelope. Your citizenship application has been approved. The ceremony is next month, but I wanted to deliver the news personally. The words didn't register at first. Mateo stared at the envelope, uncomprehending. This isn't because you saved me, Mayor Keller clarified. Though I admit that got my attention. It's because you deserve it. Your application was strong. Your character references impeccable. The concerns were procedural, not substantive. Mateo's vision blurred with unexpected tears. I can stay. You can be a citizen. There's a difference. The mayor smiled. This country will be officially yours too. Outside the window, sunlight broke through clouds, illuminating the park below. Mateo thought of his parents, how he would call them tonight with news that would ease the worry lines from their faces. He thought of Rosie, who had believed in this moment even when he couldn't. Thank you, he said finally, accepting the envelope with trembling hands. There's something else, Mayor Keller said, his tone shifting. Our new program needs someone who understands the immigrant experience firsthand. Someone with medical background who can help coordinate health services. It's a paid position with the city. I'd like to offer it to you. Mateo looked up in disbelief. Me? The hours would allow you to continue your work at the diner if you choose. Rosie tells me you're her best employee. You spoke to Rosie? The mayor chuckled. She called my office this morning. Quite persistent, that woman. Said I'd be a fool not to snap you up for public service. For the first time in years, Mateo felt a laugh bubble up from somewhere deep inside him. A real laugh, unfettered by fear or uncertainty. That sounds like Rosie. As they discussed the details of the position, something shifted in Mateo's chest. A loosening of a knot he'd carried for so long he'd forgotten it was there. He thought of the random chance that had brought the mayor to that specific diner on that specific day, how one moment had altered the trajectory of his life. When they finished their meeting, Mayor Keller walked him to the elevator. The citizenship ceremony is March 15th. I'll be there to congratulate you properly. I don't know how to thank you, Mateo said. Live a good life. Be the citizen this country needs. The mayor's eyes were earnest. And maybe teach me that Heimlich technique properly sometime. I have a feeling I owe my life to perfect execution. As the elevator doors closed, Mateo caught his reflection in the polished metal. The same face he'd seen every morning, but somehow different now. The weight of temporariness had lifted. He belonged. Outside City Hall, he called Rosie immediately. Well, she demanded without preamble. I'm going to be a citizen, he said, the words still unbelievable. And I have a job offer with the city. Rosie's delighted cry carried through the phone. Didn't I tell you? Didn't I say it would work out? You did. He smiled, watching people cross the plaza, wondering how many carried stories like his. You also called the mayor's office? Someone had to light a fire, she huffed. You coming in for your shift tomorrow, mister? Government employee? Of course, I would never leave you short-handed. He paused. Rosie, thank you for everything. Ah, mijo. Her voice softened. You did this. You saved a life because that's who you are. The universe just made sure the right person was watching. That night, Mateo stood on the small balcony of his apartment, looking at the city lights stretching into the distance. His city lights now, or they would be soon. He thought about the chance encounter that had changed everything. How the mayor had been choking one moment and changing Mateo's life the next. He remembered something his father used to say. Sometimes God whispers, sometimes he shouts, but he is always trying to tell you something. Maybe this was his message. That belonging wasn't just about papers or permissions, but about connections. About reaching out to help someone in need, regardless of who they were, and finding yourself transformed in the process. Inside, on his small kitchen table, the envelope from Mayor Keller lay open, the official approval notification catching the light. Beside it sat the business card with the job details. And next to these tangible symbols of his new beginning, Mateo had placed a worn photograph of his parents, standing in front of their small house in Guatemala. I made it, he whispered to them, though they couldn't hear. I finally made it. In the morning, he would go back to Rosie's diner and continue his shift as usual. He would pour coffee and serve meatloaf and wipe down counters. But something fundamental had changed. Each movement would be that of a man who was no longer just passing through, but a man who was home. Mayor Keller, meanwhile, sat in his study at home, nursing a glass of whiskey as he reviewed the day's events. His wife entered quietly, placing a hand on his shoulder. You're smiling, she observed. Good day? I met a remarkable man today, he replied. Someone who reminded me why I took this job in the first place. The waiter who saved you? He nodded. A paramedic from Guatemala who risked his life treating gang victims until they targeted him for it. Came here with nothing, worked his way up, never complained, still volunteers his medical skills on weekends. He sipped his whiskey. And when he saw a stranger choking, he didn't hesitate. Didn't stop to wonder if that stranger deserved saving or what he might get out of it. His wife squeezed his shoulder. Sounds like someone I'd want as a citizen. Exactly. Mayor Keller covered her hand with his. Sometimes I get so caught up in policies and procedures that I forget about the actual people involved. Mateo Alvarez reminded me. 1 month later, Mateo stood in a large auditorium with 50 other immigrants, his hand over his heart as he took the oath of allegiance. In the audience, Rosie dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. His parents watched via video call on a phone held by one of Rosie's grandsons, his mother openly weeping with pride. When his name was called, Mateo walked across the stage to receive his certificate of naturalization. Mayor Keller was there as promised, shaking his hand firmly. Congratulations, citizen, the mayor said, loud enough for the audience to hear, then quieter. Thank you for reminding me what this is all about. Mateo nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. As he moved to the side of the stage, certificate in hand, he caught sight of the other new citizens. People from different countries, different backgrounds, different journeys, all arriving at the same moment of belonging. In that heartbeat of realization, Mateo understood something profound about his new country. It wasn't perfect. The path hadn't been easy. But here, a Guatemalan paramedic could save a choking mayor and find himself transformed from outsider to citizen, from server to public servant, from someone surviving to someone belonging. And perhaps that was what citizenship truly meant. Not just rights and responsibilities on paper, but the deep human connections that turn strangers into neighbors and a foreign place into home. Later that evening, as Matteo celebrated with Rosie and her family at the diner after hours, Mayor Keller surprised them by stopping by with his wife. He brought a bottle of champagne and raised a toast to new beginnings. The formal distance between mayor and waiter had dissolved, replaced by something that felt remarkably like friendship. To Matteo, the mayor said, raising his glass, "Who proved that sometimes the person serving your food is actually the person saving your life?" Glasses clinked. Laughter flowed. And in that moment, surrounded by people who had become his American family, Matteo finally allowed himself to fully inhabit the truth. He was home. He belonged. And his story was just beginning.